And welcome on in to the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Brett Malamuth here with you, along with Zach Malamuth. Zach, it's championship weekend. We finally made it here. You excited?
I am excited. I am no longer in any championship, so that kind of bummed me out. I lost all 3 semifinals last week. It was just a terrible weekend overall. But I mean, excited to talk about some fantasy football. It's the last week we can really do so here, Brett.
Yeah, we're I'm in one. Unfortunately, it was at the demise of your fantasy football team. But hey, there's the third place game, and that's still a thing. So and I speak for a lot of people out there. Our dynasty league, I'm in our third place game as well. Took a loss last week, wasn't so great. So came down to the Monday games, and so that was kind of interesting. A little heartbreak at the end, and riding the coattails of Patrick Mahomes and the ups and downs and all of that. We'll get to all of it. Make sure that you subscribe to us on YouTube or you get your podcast. Give us a thumbs up. Zach, we got some pretty big stories that came out in the last 48 hours, just from an NFL perspective, not even fantasy football. Obviously, huge fantasy football implications, not only in redraft, but also in dynasty. Let's start in the Iowa City. The Denver Broncos have officially benched Russell Wilson. Jarrett Stidham is going to be the starter this week and next week as they shut Russell Wilson down for the final 2 weeks of the season. Zach, this is a financially based move here. They obviously have the injury guarantee in Russell Wilson's contract that he would have to be paid for 2024 and 2025, guaranteed if anything, God forbid, it happened to him, whether it's on the practice field or whatnot. We've seen it across the league the last couple of years with guys. Matt Ryan comes to mind. Then we think about like Jimmy Garoppolo, and he comes to mind. And we've seen these guys get thrown around. Derek Carr last year got shut down. And obviously they got rid of him right away, and he's now found a new home. Russell Wilson, it seems he's not going to be in Denver for 2024, and that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, with everything that's really gone on with Denver and getting Russell Wilson, bringing in Sean Payton as well, kind of having that pair, it worked out for them for a while. It definitely did. They went on that really solid win streak, put some big wins up on the board, some upsets that they definitely took advantage of. So all of that together, like, it was a great season, you would have to say, for Russell Wilson. It didn't start off like that. It was really, really poor. And they really, really struggled to start the year. The laughing stock of the NFL after that big loss to Miami. But as for Russell Wilson, like, it was a solid season for him. Like, kind of game manager type of role for him because of that Denver offense. They really relied on that run game to get things going, to open up the pass game for Russell Wilson. This kind of takes a lot of Denver guys out of consideration for fantasy purposes this week. But, I mean, looking at Russell Wilson from a dynasty point of view, you got to hold on to him. I think he's going to get a job right away. I think there's going to end up being a team that says, oh boy, like, Russell Wilson's out on the market. And a lot of teams still have belief in a guy like Russell Wilson, even though he's gone through those ups and downs. There's still a lot of positives from what he did this past season in Denver.
Yeah, I shot you a text yesterday. I have this weird belief that it's going to end up being the Atlanta Falcons. It's a team that we saw them go back and forth the entire time on who's going to be their quarterback. I don't believe they're picking that high in the draft either. And so, because of that, I think that it is the potential that they have to go after a veteran. There's names that are going to be out there like Kirk Cousins, things like that. But, Atlanta right now is at the 10th pick and they have 7 wins. And so there's a whole lot of teams there with 7 wins all the way to the 15th pick. So, in the case that they get another win here in the leagues, you're probably not picking very high. You're probably not getting that top-end quarterback who's ready to start week 1 of 2024. So I think it is a potential landing spot here, especially we talk about Arthur Smith, and we don't know what the future holds for Arthur Smith in Atlanta. And then obviously all these weapons there, Drake London, obviously Kyle Pitts. Then you have Bijan Robinson. So, Tyler Algier. Like there's weapons across the board over there. They're just missing their quarterback. And, is Russ that guy? I think he might actually be a great fit in Atlanta. I'm, thinking that they're going to take a look at him. But, when it comes to landing spots, we'll obviously have to dive in a bit more here as we approach the offseason. Things become a little bit clearer of the directions that they're going. One of the directions here now in Washington comes across Sam Howell. A lot of people were very high on Sam Howell. He gets benched now. Jacoby Brissett came in last week, played against the Jets in the second half, and led the comeback or almost comeback win. He to start this week. And this is a really big deal because a lot of people were very high on Sam Howell in that building. Not sure what it actually means in terms of the long-term future of Sam Howell. Not sure what it means exactly for Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera has been under a lot of scrutiny in the last couple of weeks here, and whether he keeps his job next year and all of that, that remains to be seen. But what do you take here from Sam Howell in bed?
See, it's really interesting, Brett, because I mean, being on social media the last couple of days, like Commanders fans are really, really frustrated by this. Like, really annoyed that Sam Howell, after like a solid season, like has now officially been benched. So I think the last couple of weeks have been awful. You can't say anything less than that. They've just been terrible when he's been out at quarterback, and Jacoby Brissett's come in and right away has gone on a tear. Both weeks he against LA, against the Rams, he really was just slinging the ball around for a while, found McLaurin a couple times. And then this past week, they almost make a ginormous comeback, almost completed it against the Jets. So I think for Sam Howell, what I would say heading into this offseason is the question mark of is he going to be the guy? I think he will be next year, Brett. I think this is kind of the last two games here. Give him kind of a break and also take some of the pressure off him. They're a team that's going to be getting a top pick or near a top pick. Like they're going to be at the bottom of the NFL in the last 2 weeks. So, I mean, it really looking at it right now, Sam Howell, I think, is going to be the quarterback next year. I think they're kind of taking some pressure off him right now. I do think a lot of people will be fired in Washington. They're probably going to end up cleaning house because this season was just absolutely terrible in every facet for them.
Yeah, and they play San Francisco this week. And so, I could basically say that they're going to lose that game. I mean, it's a pretty good, easy prediction based on what we've seen so far from both teams. And with that, they would head to 4-12 and essentially be guaranteed one of those top 4 picks in the draft. And so, yeah, you talk about who they might actually get there. I think that they're not looking at a quarterback. I think that they're looking at a Marvin Harrison Jr. Could him because Sam Howell, listen, he proved himself that he could be good. He just needs weapons around him, and that's a team that really doesn't have any weapons. Brian Robinson's a good piece. Terry McLaurin's an even better piece. I don't know that there's any top-end talent coming Washington's way unless it's through the draft right now. And not sure how much top-end talent we might actually have out there on the open market. We'll talk about that another day in terms of the free agency preview and who actually might just get franchise tagged and not see the open market. But yeah, I think that they're looking at a Marvin Harrison Jr., and that would be kind of interesting. So maybe this is a little gamesmanship here. They know that, listen, it's a tough test here, and they don't want to close the kid out to get torched by a San Francisco defense. Maybe it's more of that.
Yeah, I agree. Just kind of take the pressure off his back. He's young. He's still got a lot of time. And I mean, he's shown some really good signs so far this season. So he's probably going to end up being the quarterback next year. I would think so. And like you said, they could be looking at a wide receiver or a big-time player with a high pick in this year's draft.
Yeah, and of course, their Week 18 matchup actually comes against the Dallas Cowboys. So, could be a rough ending here. So, hide the kid from any sort of damage or any sort of mental confidence.
Yep.
All right, so we got some big injury news this week from a fantasy perspective here, and just an NFL perspective overall. TJ Hawkinson, he's out for the season, torn ACL, torn MCL. In fact, this was some major news just for a dynasty perspective because he might not be ready for the start of next season. Probably come in way point. As far as the Minnesota Vikings go, they're right now in the thick of the playoff hunt, and so big game this weekend on Sunday Night Football. Packers, we'll talk about them and their cornerback that they'll be missing this week heading into Sunday Night Football. Huge game, but there's a playoff spot on the line. Potential 6 seed, 7 seed on the line here heading into this weekend. So it's huge news. In just huge news, Nick Mullins also got benched in favor of Darren Hall this week. So Zach, what's just your outlook here on the Vikings and then Hawkinson as far as dynasty here?
So, I mean, I'll start off with Hawkinson and the injury. Like this one stings for any dynasty owner. Of course, he's still young. He's 26 right now. He's going to be 27 at the start of next year. Still got a lot of time in the NFL, but this is kind of an injury where you'd never really hope for it to happen anyway. But if it happens late season, you're pretty disappointed because that means it probably is going to edge into some part of this upcoming year or the next year. I think it's just a really disappointing thing for Hawkinson owners. Hopefully he's able to come back soon and can make a quick recovery. We've seen a lot of guys with a lot of different injuries come back pretty quick. The rehab phase has been very quick and developed very well by the NFL. So that should be a positive sign for Hawkinson owners. I would say for now, looking at the Vikings, I don't really have much other than Justin Jefferson here, Brett. I think Justin Jefferson proved that he's the number one wide in fantasy football. He's the number one wide in football in the NFL. He is that guy. They went to him on a number of really tough plays. There was one catch that really stood out to me. It was a 4th down, goes all the way up, grabs it, nailed by 2 defenders. Yeah, that's no problem. So I think they're just going to be slinging the ball to him most of the time because, of course, Jair Alexander is going to be out, and we'll get to that later for the Packers. They don't have their top corner. So I think Jefferson's just going to be the focus for this Vikings offense.
I agree. I think that it's just pretty interesting as far as the timing of it. Like we said, I think this is also going to be a guy that slips in next year's redraft just because of the injury, and we're not sure how many games he's going to get. Would be a potential option if you are one of those teams who likes to wait on your tight end. You might be able to wait on TJ Hawkinson and still get a pretty decent tight end here. Obviously, all things considered, with him coming back completely healthy and all of that.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we're kind of expecting all of next year. I think they'll have him back at some point during the season next year.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into standouts. And Zach, we got to start with this guy. I mean, if you told me Amari Cooper was going to have 265 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns on 11 catches on 15 targets, I would have told you were nuts because their quarterback was Joe Flacco heading into this week. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter who the quarterback was. Basically, the game plan was pass the ball to Amari, plain and simple. And each and every time that they came out, he was the first read on every single play. A whopping 51.5 standard PPR points. I mean, this guy won your semifinal, plain and simple. And, now obviously we head into this weekend and he's going against the Jets tonight. A little bit of a tougher matchup. According to NFL insider Mike Garoppolo, seems like he's, all things considered, going to play tonight with the heel injury. He's going to test it in warm-up, but should be all go. And so, what can you say about Amari Cooper here?
I mean, it's just absolutely insane, Brett. The numbers that he was able to put up just unreal, especially during the fantasy semifinals, like big time points that he put up, over 50 of them for some people, like really, really big numbers. And I think just the positive is that Flacco's looking at his number one target. Like, he is the number one target. People will say, oh, David Njoku. Like, no, it's Amari Cooper. He's the top guy there in Cleveland. He's going to be the top weapon for any quarterback that steps in there. So just keep targeting him. The 15 targets is kind of what stands out to me. 15 targets. That's the most he's had this season. And I mean, he's only gotten over 10 3 times before that this season. So a big time game, got a ton of targets, ended up grabbing a ton of receptions too. That kind of was a problem with Amari Cooper. He would get a ton of targets, but how many of those would he bring in and actually grab a reception for it? So 11 of them, of the 15 targets, he got a reception on. So that was huge for him. And then, of course, the touchdown. So if you get in the end zone, like, fantasy day is going to boost even more. I think those two things really, really huge for Amari Cooper. Like I said, though, the targets and then being able to bring those in was really huge this week.
I really think that this boosted any value that he had in Dynasty dramatically, because obviously playoffs and that holds a lot of weight. And so as far as Amari Cooper's value goes, you probably can get a lot now for him heading into this offseason, where without performances weekend, I'm not sure it would have been that much. He was ranked wide receiver 37 on our friends from Keep Trade Cut. And, I don't know that you would have seen that last week. It just, he's skyrocketed in the values. And so there'll be a lot of people out there who want him. And so I think you can sort of take advantage of that if you are one of those teams that is open to trading him.
Yeah, I mean, it's a guy who's still probably got a fair amount of time in the NFL. He's only 29. So, of course, like, you'll head into those 30s, but if he's playing like this, that won't matter. He's still playing at an all-time level.
And on the other side of the ball tonight, it's Breece Hall. And Breece Hall had an amazing game last weekend against the Washington Commanders. 20 carries, 95 yards rushing with 2 touchdowns. Also caught 12 balls on 16 targets for 96 yards, finishing with 43.1 standard PPR points. Zach, another amazing performance. Also from Mike Garafolo, it's that Alan Lazard is going to miss tonight's game with an illness. I think that actually helps in boosting Breece Hall's value here even more. Not that you were even contemplating starting or sitting him. Like, you're going to start him point blank if you have him. But I think that this could be a bigger workload now tonight against a tough defense than we maybe thought before.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. So I think this is very interesting because we talked about it last week. Like, this matchup was perfect for a guy like Breece Hall. Washington was really bad against running backs all throughout this season. So Breece Hall had a really, really great matchup, and he took advantage of it. Ends up getting those 20 carries. Didn't get to 100 yards, but still has 43 fantasy points. So that's unbelievable. It was the receptions and the receiving yards that really boosted him. And, of course, the 2 rushing touchdowns that really helped out his day. I think the biggest thing for tonight is I don't know if he's going to get a lot of those rushing attempts. I think they're going to have to pass the ball. They're playing a tough Cleveland defense that is not easy against the run. I think their one weakness is probably coming a little bit in their secondary, wherever it is. I feel like they will be passing the ball a lot. And with Trevor Siemian at quarterback, you probably got to expect a lot of checkdowns. So I think Breece Hall is going to get a lot of targets tonight. I don't know about 16 and 12 receptions. Those are kind of Kamara numbers, but I think he'll get a fair amount of targets and definitely put up some good fantasy numbers.
Yeah, it was pretty Kamara-esque, just in terms of every single time he would look right over the middle and Breece would be right there wide open. And we've seen that explosively, what he do when he gets into open space, and the way he creates open space is just amazing. And so, yeah, I mean, Breece Hall it is definitely a guy that going forward here, I think is going to be a dominant fantasy owner. or dominant fantasy player heading into 2024. Definitely moved up a lot of boards as far as draft value goes.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so our third stat here was actually a bit of a surprise this week. It was George Pickens. 4 catches, 195 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 6 targets. Zach, this was insane. He broke off a huge run, which probably skews the numbers a little bit in terms of the yardage, but he just 35.5 standard PPR points. Listen, he only had 4 catches. And so I don't know that I'm holding that much into George Pickens, especially when it was just like 2 weeks ago that we were talking about his effort and things like that. Kind of crazy that he proved everybody wrong on this. He broke off a couple big ones and 195 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, how about 48.8 yards per reception, Brett? Just absolutely insane. 4 receptions and then 195 yards. Of course, you're going to say that, yeah, those 2 touchdowns, those 2 big plays. But I mean, that's a positive, I would say, because of the new quarterback coming in for that game was Mason Rudolph, and he kind of struggled to find Deontay Johnson, but he didn't struggle to find George Pickens. So that kind of changes things for me in terms of those Pittsburgh wide receivers. Although the target share wasn't insane, like he got 6 targets and it turned into 4 receptions, even though those numbers are pretty small, it kind of proved to me that he could end up being the number 1 for Pittsburgh as long as Mason Rudolph is the quarterback. George Pickens is a really talented wide receiver. He could be a wide receiver 1 really anywhere. I think there's a lot of places that would say, yeah, George Pickens, he's a wide receiver 1. So I think in Pittsburgh, it's kind of been a little rough the last couple of weeks and kind of arguments on the sideline, things going on, a lot of drama in Pittsburgh. But George Pickens just silenced everybody. He said, yeah, I'm that guy. I'm gonna show everybody that I can ball. So I think the biggest thing right here is George Pickens being that number 1 target for Mason Rudolph. That's what stands out to me from this game, Brett.
Yeah, I agree. I think that George Pickens, at least going forward now, we can settle a lot of the noise and go forward as far as the knock on George Pickens. I think that he does have that ability. Listen, I think back to the last year in the preseason, there was so much hype around him because of that one-handed catch. He just grabbed it with one hand. Everybody was like, oh man, this guy is going to be this superstar. And he went very high in a lot of drafts because of that. That ability is still there. I think that the consistency needs to be there a little bit more. And that's why we've started to have these conversations about George Pickens. But listen, I think he's going to be one of those mid-tier wide receivers heading into next season. Certainly has the ability. Curious to see what happens in Pittsburgh also in this offseason as far as, coaching matters and obviously the offensive coordinator and what their thoughts are on Kenny Pickett. There's a lot of question marks. That's a potential Russell Wilson landing spot. There's a lot of things that could happen in the next couple months here in relation to George Pickens' fantasy value. So definitely keep an eye on.
Yeah, I agree, Brett. Just pure talent wise, there's not many better at wide receiver than George Pickens. Pure talent, he's near the top of the league.
Yeah, certainly. All right, so before we get into our matchups here, just want to give a quick breaking news here on some inactives that just came through from the New York Jets. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is out. Zach Wilson is out, still in concussion protocol. Jeremy Ruckert is out, and Alan Lazard is obviously, as I said before, he is out sick tonight against the Browns. And Amari Cooper is he in? I think he's out. Hold on. This is some big news here in terms of fantasy. I don't give wrong information. All right, well, let's just jump right into the preview. We'll jump onto the Jets first, and then we'll get the Amari Cooper's out. He did not feel right in warmups, and so everything that we just said about Amari Cooper and his talent, it's great, but it's not going to be great for today. So he's out against the Jets. Big news there in terms of fantasy. So make sure that you don't put him in your lineup. But as far as this matchup goes, I think that sort of changes things a little bit here. As far as the Jets center goes, I don't know that you can really start anybody. I don't know that I'm going out and getting Cedric Tillman unless it's in a dynasty and I'm just stashing him. I'm not starting Elijah Moore this weekend because obviously now you have to deal with Sauce as your guy and Reed as well. Like, I'm staying away from all of them. The only guy who I might look at is Jerome Ford, and that's in a flex option right now. But yeah, it kind of just became dim here, even with Joe Flacco at quarterback.
Yeah, I agree, Brett. It's for me, it's Jerome Ford as a flex play, and of course David Njoku is starting at tight end for you if you have him. So those two guys really stand out, and I think Njoku he gets a ton of targets already. I think he'll get even more tonight. So that's definitely huge news with Cooper out. I think Njoku takes probably a bulk of those targets. He's really their top weapon now by far if Cooper's out of the lineup.
Yeah, I'd say that if you were between two guys as far as Njoku and somebody else, Njoku probably just got a really big bump here with this news here. Obviously, you got a little more than an hour to go until game time. And so, there is the opportunity to go out and change your lineup around here. But yeah, that's some big news. I think that that's going to change the whole outlook of what the Cleveland offense looks like tonight. As far as the Jets go, I think it's the same thing we've been saying for pretty much every week now. Garrett Wilson, you're going to start him if you have him. You're not that confident. It is a bad matchup. Cleveland has been very tough at defense. Obviously, the game is in Cleveland as well in the dog pound. And so, yeah, I'm not as confident about Garrett, but I'm still obviously playing him. And then Breece Hall, and you're rolling him out there, and that's kind of it. I don't know that I'm really having my eye on anyone. As far as dynasty goes, Zach, you might have noticed I picked up Izzy Abanikanda. I think that that's a potential guy that we're going to see a lot of in the secondary role that probably could end up being the backup now next year. I'm not sure that they're going to retain Dalvin Cook. And then Jeremy Ruckert, I said it, like, he's a guy I would keep my eye on, but he's not playing tonight. So they actually called up Zach Kuntz, who's a guy who has had freakish ability. They talked about him very highly in the draft. So a deeper add in dynasty perspective at the tight end position. Yeah, he's a guy who is just extremely athletic.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. I mean, in terms of you said they're really the main guys there. It's Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson kind of picking and choosing. Like Breece Hall, you're definitely starting. Garrett Wilson, based on who you got in your lineup, it's the championship. So just kind of go with what you've been riding with. I think just one more deeper guy that in deeper leagues that I would be looking at is Ty Conklin, because Cleveland, their one weakness in the secondary is against tight ends. Like, it's at safety and linebacker. Like, they've kind of struggled, and the last couple of weeks there's been some big numbers. Dalton Schultz had a huge game against Cleveland last week. A couple of guys, Evan Ingram, a couple of weeks before. So I'd be looking at Ty Conklin, but really only in deeper leagues. I wouldn't put him really anywhere close to those top guys at tight end.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know that there's really much more to say. This is going to be those just couple guys here. Otherwise, I'm expecting a lower football game, two good defenses, two not as great offenses. Sans Joe Flacco throwing for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns against the Jets in the revenge game.
I was going to say Thursday Night Football has brought us some slugfest so far this year, Brett. I think we can just add this one to the list.
Yeah, this is going to be an absolute dogfight. And yeah, Joe Flacco is going to, I think, start slinging them here. He's going to try to pick apart that secondary. So I'm curious to see how that actually goes and whether he can actually do that.
Going to be interesting.
All right, so we head to some Saturday Night Football. Zach, this is going to be another slugfest, I think. Could be an offensive slugfest. just as much as it is a defensive slugfest. Detroit Lions head to Jerry World to take on the Dallas Cowboys. 8:15 Saturday night. Zach, let's start with the Cowboys because I think that CeeDee Lamb is making the case for a first-round pick this season, this next coming season.
I would probably agree with you. I think I would say CeeDee Lamb is going to be up there. Of course, with just everything going on with other wide receivers and kind of question marks here and there, I think CeeDee Lamb is going to be one of those guys where it's like kind of near end of first round. Whether it's 10 or 12 team leagues, a lot of leagues I'm in kind of focus on running backs. So I would put CeeDee Lamb in that kind of group of wide receivers that you see maybe towards the end of round one. So I definitely think CeeDee Lamb could be part of that group. And he's just been really, really solid, even with just last week's game. And he started off great. Then they stopped going to him for 3 quarters. Then they went back to him when it was a little bit too late. He'd still finished with 6 catches for 118 yards and a touchdown. So ran the ball twice as well. So they're getting him involved in all kinds of ways. So I think for CeeDee Lamb, it's just a great matchup this week against Detroit, who haven't been great against wide receivers. I think they're just going to focus in on him. He's wide receiver 1 on a lot of boards heading into this championship week.
Yeah, it should be pretty interesting. I mean, just as far as CD's value goes, like it's gone to the moon, I think, this season. He's about as must start as you can get in terms of any of these wide receiver focused leagues here. And yeah, I agree with you. I think that at that back end of the first round, you start to clump in those couple sides, where Cooper Kupp, you were seeing Cooper Kupp a lot last season. I think it's that sort of range there, 6, 7, 8, 9 range. He's proven like he's going to be the guy. Seems like Dak's getting a contract extension, and curious to see what that does and what leads to as far as the ripple effect around the league. But he seems like he's going to be out there ready to go next year and for years to come. And obviously, like, it is a good matchup for him. So you're probably rolling Dak out if you have him heading into this week. As far as Brandon Cooks goes, I would say he's probably a flex option this week. I think that he's proven that he's been able to get himself in the end zone open. So he scored a touchdown, I believe, in 3 of his last 4 games. And so, another guy who's definitely there. And I would say that Tony Pollard's a little bit interesting here because I think I'm downgrading him a bit. Detroit has been really good as running backs. And so while, yes, you're playing Tony Pollard on your team, if you have him, I would temper expectations a little bit here for this week matchup. And then I would say Jake Ferguson's probably a borderline start here. He had 4 catches, 45 yards last week. He had 8 targets, though. That was the number that kind of stood out to me. It's a safer play. It's a bit of a safer play. He's been getting a pretty heavy workload, double-digit fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 weeks. He had 8.5 last week, but double digits the previous 3 weeks. It's a pretty safe option.
Yeah, Brett, I agree. I think just looking at everything, I could rant for hours on a guy like Tony Pollard. You know that. Of course, my first round pick in one of my big leagues, very disappointing, and I ended up getting knocked out this past week. I don't think of course, you're starting Tony Pollard, but I don't think I could trust Tony Pollard until the Cowboys actually give him the ball when they're on the 2-yard line. Instead of giving it to a fullback in Lipke and he fumbles and it ends up losing Dallas the game in the end. So like when it comes to that, like I just don't have a lot of confidence in a guy like Tony Pollard. And then especially this week, it's the matchup against Detroit that's really kind of hurting his value for this week. So not expecting a lot from him. It's going to be one of those other games for Tony Pollard this week. But everybody else, you said it, Jake Ferguson, CeeDee Lamb, as well as Brandon Cooks, and of course Dak Prescott. Could be solid days for every single one of them.
And then as far as the other side of the ball, you have the Detroit Lions. This is kind of that start your guys thing that we say pretty much every week. Laporta, you're playing him. Montgomery, I believe he is a set it and forget it guy just because the floor is so high. He had 17 carries, 55 yards. He did score a touchdown, which sort of saved his fantasy day last week. But this guy's just been getting the workload. And so I'm keeping him in there. I think that that's a high floor, while the ceiling might not be as high based on what we've seen out of Gibbs the last couple of weeks. And obviously, you're playing him, you're playing Amon-Ra. I think that the Jared Goff train rolls on as far as super flex, but as far as the one quarterbacks, I think this is probably one of those where I'm going to sit him out.
Yeah, definitely. I have Jared Goff. Of course, it's a third place game, but he's straight to the bench. I do not like the matchup this week against Dallas. I went a couple of other ways, and there's a lot of streamers right now on the waiver. So definitely look out for a different option than Goff this week.
Yeah, and then lastly, I will say Jameson Williams is a very risky play this week, and he had 5 catches last week for 43 yards. He's been playing a ton over the last bunch of weeks, and I think that while it's going to be a really good dynasty play moving forward, and it's certainly a guy that you can go out right now and buy low on because that snap share is going to continue to grow until it's 100%. And he's one of those regular guys, and we're starting to see he got 6 targets last week. I think that number is going to continue to rise as well. He's going to become a focal point of this offense with Amon-Ra alongside Amon-Ra next season. And so it's a guy that in the offseason, you probably can come for dirt cheap. And I think that it's going to be a guy who obviously has a very high talent, a very high ceiling. I think that that's a guy that I'm definitely going to have my eye on. Obviously, I traded him away. It was an interesting season for my dynasty team, but it's a guy I would keep my eye on for any dynasty owner out there.
Yeah, definitely agree, Brett.
All right, so let's jump to the next matchup here. We head to our Sunday slate, and we start out in Baltimore as the Miami Dolphins take on the Baltimore Ravens. Zach, Miami, it's pretty easy. You're starting your guys here. It's a little bit of an interesting one. Obviously, we got some questionable tags across the way, and every single week, I think that we've seen Mostert sideline the Thursday practice. So we'll see what happens now, whether he actually plays tomorrow and heads into the weekend ready to go. But there is a chance here now that he doesn't play. So what happens with Devon Achane if you aren't playing, if Mostert is not playing?
I mean, Achane then jumps up. So this is an interesting one for me, Brett, because I think if Mostert's playing, then you're starting him. If Mostert's playing in terms of Achane, I can kind of go either way on it. I think he's a flex option, but there's also the risk of this matchup. Like, it's not a great matchup. Although, Baltimore, their entire defense is good, so they could go a lot of different ways. We haven't seen a ton from Devon Achane in the last couple of weeks, and the workload hasn't been crazy high. That's kind of been one of the big stick out points from Devon Achane is the workload. It's not really even close to what Raheem Mostert gets. So I think if Mostert's out, definitely start Achane because I think he could have upside of a top 10 running back this week because of the workload he'll get. He clearly is the guy behind Raheem Mostert, so he'll get a ton of that workload. However, if Mostert's in, I can go either way on Achane this week, Brett. But for everybody else, it's kind of start your guys. I'm a little iffy on Achane.
Yeah, it's also kind of notable. Tua Heap was a limited participant. Tyreek was a limited participant. Achane was a limited participant as well. And so monitor those guys across the weekend as we head into the Sunday matchup. Should be noted that Jalen Waddle will not play. He's not expected to play this weekend. Some big news there. And obviously, Zach, like we talk about Tyreek's value, I can only think, what is Tyreek's value if Waddle doesn't play? But what about the rest of them? If the running backs are playing, can you feel confident if it's just Tyreek out there?
Would feel confident because he's Tyreek Hill, and he can kind of do everything, and they'll make a game plan surrounding him. So that's not really what I'm worried about. I will be a little worried about like the yards and those deep balls and kind of what we think of when we think of Tyreek Hill. I think it'll be more of screen plays and kind of just like short routes to get him open and then let him break loose and get that speed going beyond that Baltimore secondary. So I think that's really going to be the focus for Miami this week is those short routes for a guy like Tyreek Hill because Baltimore's not allowing him to get deep like some other secondaries have allowed in the past.
Yeah, certainly. And then as far as the other side of the ball, we have the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, you're rolling out Lamar Jackson. I think that Zay Flowers, obviously, with the injury right now, he's not practicing. He did not practice today with a calf injury, so would keep my eye on that one. As far as it goes after that, I'm not that confident in pretty much anybody. The Gus Bus, listen, the Gus Bus rolls on. It wasn't that good though last weekend, and so probably a flex option for me. Isaiah Likely, probably a borderline, but I probably would stay away from him. I think that there's probably better options that you would have on your team than Isaiah Likely. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'm not playing Odell. I'm going to stay away from Odell. But yeah, what do you think here on the Baltimore Ravens side?
I mean, I'm a little higher on Likely than you are. I think yes, the targets weren't great last week. He only got 4 of them, but I mean, he was going up against San Francisco, number 1, and number 2. Who in the world expected that game script? I mean,
True.
I was the last person to expect that game to go that way, and all of a sudden, Baltimore just has to kill clock in the fourth quarter. That's what they're focusing on. So in a game like this, it's going to be closer, I think, against Miami. I think Miami, although they've been terrible on the road in big games, I think they'll put up a good fight here in Baltimore. So I'm a little bit higher on Isaiah Likely. I think the targets will be there this week. He still had 56 yards in the game, so that was huge for him. So I'm still kind of high on him. I think for the rest of them, like you said, kind of monitor Zay Flowers. And then as far as Gus Edwards goes, the positive you would say is, I mean, when they get to the goal line, who are they going to? It's that guy. So if he falls into the end zone, then it's a good play. Yes, the yards weren't there, and they're kind of relying on Justice Hill to kind of be that change of pace back. But they also give him a lot of opportunities in the passing game. I would say they're both like low end flexes. I wouldn't put them really high in there. There's low end flex plays. If you have nobody else and you're like, all right, well, Gus Edwards fall into the end zone, then I'm kind of okay with it, Brett.
Totally agree on that one. Let's jump to our next matchup. It's a battle in the AFC East in Buffalo as the Patriots travel to Orchard Park to take on the Bills. 1 p.m. start. Zach, it's pretty easy when we say on the New England Patriots side, you're probably staying away here. I would say that Demario Douglas and Zeke are probably flex options. Ramondre Stevenson got added to the IR list yesterday. So I think that, Zeke probably holds a little more flex consideration than he would have the day before. But other than that, I think I'm staying away from pretty much the entire New England Patriots offense.
100%. Yeah, I think Demario Douglas is a flex option, and I'm really I'm not crazy high on it. Yeah, it's a better matchup because Buffalo's kind of struggled against wide receivers, but I'm not confident in them this week. They're going to Buffalo, and although Belichick has found some tricks in his bag to win some games here and there, I don't think he's going to be able to do that. The Bills are on fire right now. Their defense is rolling even through those injuries. And I think, Douglas for me is a low-end flex. I'm not confident in him. And then, of course, I would say Zeke you could put in your lineup because of the workload, because of the receptions that he gets out of the backfield, especially now Ramondre out for the season. Yeah, I'd be riding with Zeke definitely in this game.
And then as far as the other side of the ball, the Buffalo Bills, you're obviously rolling out Josh Allen. You're obviously rolling out Stephon Diggs. I think James Cook's interesting because I think James Cook's still a top option, even with last week's game. He had 20 carries for 70 yards. He's the reason why I'm not in the finals right now in our Dynasty League. Plain and simple, pretty disappointing night for him last weekend. But at the same time, I think it was a pretty disappointing night for the entire Buffalo Bills organization. Even getting a win, they did not look their best. And I think this is going to be one of those games where they need to bounce back. They all know that they need to bounce back as they start to head into the stretch here. If they win out, then they make the playoffs. And they all realize that. And so I think that this is one of the games where they kind of get right. That said, I don't know that I'm playing Dalton Kincaid this week, and the reason is the matchup. New England is one of the top, I believe, 8 teams right now against tight ends, and so that seems to be the only thing going right for New England in terms of fantasy football is their matchups against tight ends. So I'm actually staying away from Dalton Kincaid tonight, or this weekend, right? Gabe Davis, listen, he's a flex option, but it's a bit of a risk here, just because it's always tough to predict when Gabe Davis is going to go off and when he's not. So it's a flex option. I'm probably going to stay away from him, though.
Completely agree. I would also be staying away from Kincaid. You said it. The matchup's very difficult. But as far as Buffalo goes, it's start your main guys and roll with them. It should be a solid week for them. They're at home this week.
All right, jump over to our next matchup. It is the Atlanta Falcons traveling to Chicago to take on the Bears. Zach, obviously you're starting Bijan, and that's well and good. But is there anybody else that you're actually looking to start here in Atlanta, even if it's in a good matchup?
Not really. I think Drake London is a flex option, and that's pretty much it. I think that's kind of my confidence level in Atlanta right now. And Chicago's defense has been really good the last couple of weeks. They made Arizona's offense that did look okay for a little while under Kyler Murray. They made them look silly last week. So really bad week for Arizona, and then great week for Chicago's defense. So it's not going to be an easy matchup for Atlanta. I would say it's Bijan, and then, like I said, London's a flex play for me.
I agree. I think that you're staying away from the Kyle Pittses this weekend. Like, he only had 3 catches. Yeah, he had a touchdown last week, which was awesome, and it was great. 3 catches, 49 yards, scored a touchdown, which is notable because he doesn't score very many of those. But yeah, Drake London's a pretty risky flex play, I would say, just because we've seen the floor bottom out on him quite a bit, and obviously now the quarterback situation, Taylor Heineke, we talked about it at the top of the show, like, you're not really confident right now in the quarterback situation in Atlanta. I'm not confident as far as it goes this weekend. As far as Chicago goes, though, this is an interesting matchup because Atlanta's a very good defense. However, they also have their flaws. And so if you have DJ Moore, you're playing him. I would say that's pretty solid. If you have Cole Kmet, you're probably playing him. And if you have Justin Fields, I would say he's probably a borderline quarterback 1 this week. But outside of that, I think that, as far as the running backs go, I'm staying away from both of them because I think the floor is very low on both of them.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, Kmet
all 3 of them, really.
Yeah, I agree. As far as Kmet, like, he had a nasty injury last week and a knee injury, did not look good. He's questionable right now. Missed practice today as well, so something to monitor. Hopefully you got another option to start in his place. If he does play, you should probably start him. And the only reason probably not if he's playing is if they're saying that he's going to be playing in a limited role due to that injury. So kind of monitor it as the days go on. So I think, but other than that, it's Fields as well as DJ Moore. That duo has been pretty solid. So I think it's going to be another good game for them. They're at home this week. A lot of confidence at Soldier Field, and I think they'll be rolling this week.
I agree. So let's jump to our next matchup here. It is the Las Vegas Raiders as they travel to Indianapolis to take on Gardner Minshew and the Indianapolis Colts. Zach, let's talk some Gardner Minshew here. The Minshew mania has just been awesome. I mean, it's been going on for quite a few years here now. Wasn't really the case last week against Atlanta. Just got over 200 yards on the day, 20 of 37. He threw a pick, did not throw a touchdown. So I'm going to say in a super flex for the first time this year, I am not playing Gardner Minshew in my lineup this weekend because I think the pass rush that the Las Vegas Raiders displayed against the team like the Kansas City Chiefs last week really scares me.
That's definitely fair, and I agree with you. Like it's a tough pass rush to go up against, led by Max Crosby, and we could say all we want, Minshew mania, the mustache man, whatever we want. It's just not a good option this week going up against this Vegas front, and I think for Indianapolis, Taylor as well as Pittman, and then Josh Downs as a flex play is probably the way to go for me. I think the thing about Pittman. Of course, he missed last week's game, and now we're kind of monitoring this week. I think he's going to be ready to go. Not wearing a red jersey anymore at practice, so that kind of advancing through protocol. That's big time for him. So you're looking forward to having him back if you're in the championship this week. So it's a solid matchup for him against Vegas. They can kind of take advantage of those corners.
Yeah, and as far as the Las Vegas Raiders go, should be noted that it looks like Josh Jacobs will not play this weekend, and that means Zamir White will be in. Zach, I mean, it's pretty cool how Zamir White last week kind of took the national stage and ran 22 carries, 145 yards. He broke up a couple big ones to run out the clock. And, Zamir White, I think that you sort of have to ride the hot hand right now. He's probably a flex option for me. I would say that, as far as Jacobs goes, like if you have him, you're probably not very happy. He hasn't practiced the last couple of days. He's likely going to be out. I say like in quotations, just based off of what it looks like and how it appears. Other than that, though, like you're probably starting Jacoby Myers. But also, he really didn't do much last week. 3 catches, 42 yards. The week before that, he had only 2 catches for 32 yards. And so, also probably a flex option. And I think there's a little bit of risk there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think there's some risk to Myers. The game script kind of went a little wrong last week. I thought Myers would be a good option against Kansas City. However, it turned out they didn't need to throw the ball. They just ran it with Zamir White. And I would say White's he's a flex option if Jacobs doesn't play with upside of RB2 because, I mean, he's put up RB2 numbers the last couple of weeks. The reason I wouldn't put him any higher is because of his work in the passing game. Hasn't been a ton. Had a couple catches the week before, but then last week just non-existent in the passing game, and it was more Amir Abdullah and just getting it out to those wide receivers and tight ends. So kind of takes that value a little bit away when it comes to the really high upside for him, but still RB2 upside, really solid. And like I said, I'd be starting him if Jacobs can't go. And then, I agree on Adams and as well as Myers. Those two are solid options. Of course, Adams, you're obviously starting, and then Myers is a flex play.
All right, so let's do our next matchup. It is the Carolina Panthers against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Zach, it was a pretty big performance for DJ Chark last week, catching 2 touchdowns, 6 catches, 98 yards on 8 targets. But does he warrant any roster position for you right now heading into the future?
I don't think so, Brett. I can understand why some people would be high on DJ Chark now, but I think it's kind of Adam Thielen is the top guy, and then DJ Chark wherever he can get those kind of targets. Just it kind of comes in there. I would say for Carolina, like right now it's Chuba Hubbard, and then everybody else is a flex play for me. Even Chuba Hubbard's probably a flex play, but everybody after that, it's just very wishy-washy because, of course, Mingo and Chark can get their targets. How much they will turn that into is a question mark. And yes, Chark had a great week last week. I don't know if I'm expecting the same. Yeah, it's an okay matchup against Jacksonville, but I think this offense kind of runs through the run game, and then it's pretty much a toss-up anywhere else out there.
Yeah, and as far as it goes with the rest of the team, like I'm not playing any of them. I'm staying away. I know that Bryce Young had a pretty good game heading in last week, and it was a good result. But I think that the rest of the season kind of speaks for itself. You're in a spot right now where you're in a championship game or third place game. The floor is nothing. The floor is a zero bomb from Bryce Young, and so I think I have to stay away from that. Hopefully, you have a second quarterback that you picked up in a superflex. You are starting instead. Adam Thielen probably warrants a flex option. Chuba Hubbard probably warrants a flex option, higher end flex option, if not a lower end running back too. But yeah, I'm probably staying away from the rest of them, and that includes DJ Chark, even with the really good performance from last week. And then as far as Jacksonville goes, I think it's a little interesting, and we continue to monitor what Trevor Lawrence is doing. He did not practice on Thursday, so CJ Beathard would be the starter if he cannot play. Zach, I think this is an interesting one just in terms of Calvin Ridley's value as well as Evan Ingram and what the floor is versus the ceiling.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing I'd say is, for me, even if Lawrence is out of the lineup, I would feel like Beathard will go to those kind of top options. I would say Ridley is a flex option, and then Ingram might still be starting because I feel like with a backup quarterback, they kind of go to the tight ends a little bit more. It's a solid matchup against Carolina. Not a great matchup. So that's the one thing it kind of takes away. I would say if Carolina had one weakness, it is at safety, and against tight ends, they have not been good this year. Tucker Kraft had a couple of catches where he ran pretty far for Green Bay last week. So I would say Evan Ingram. I'm more confident clearly in Ingram this week if Beathard's at quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this is actually going to be one of those weeks where there's the potential based off of the way my lineups are. I might actually be playing two tight ends this weekend. I'm going to have Evan Ingram as well as Trey McBride in my lineup. Both guys with very high floors, touchdown potential. But yeah, you really can't go wrong, I think, with either quarterback as far as Evan Ingram's perspective goes. I'm just kind of curious, though, as far as the quarterback situation, if Trevor Lawrence is playing, are you putting him in your lineup in a one quarterback league?
I would probably not. I think this is one of the toughest matchups actually in the NFL. This Carolina pass defense, which crazy to say. Their record doesn't speak for that. They're a tough passing defense. So not an easy look for them. And I would say for Travis Etienne owners, this is probably the best matchup you could get in a championship game. You're probably really confident heading into this one. This is, I think, clearly one of the worst running defenses in the NFL. And I think Travis Etienne can have a monster day, Brett, with a couple touchdowns, maybe. And then if he could get to 100 yards, I think we're seeing a monster game at home in Jacksonville. I think the quarterback situation also kind of helps that case because Lawrence might not be at 100%. Beathard coming in, a backup quarterback, you're going to want to run the ball and take the pressure off that guy's back. So I think Travis Etienne is in for a monster day, Brett.
All right, let's head to our next matchup. Tennessee at Houston. Zach, CJ Stroud clears concussion protocol, and so he will be in the lineup this weekend, we expect. This really is a big boost for pretty much everybody involved over there in Houston. Nico Collins, I think, becomes a sure start. Devin Singletary, I would say, probably is a higher-end flex option now And Noah Brown, I think, even gets a look there as a flex option. Dalton Schultz probably now goes back to a tight end one. Last week, I think he wasn't. Just based off the quarterback situation, I think now it belongs there. What are your thoughts here on Houston?
I agree on all fronts there, Brett. I think this is one of the matchups that you really look forward to is this Tennessee secondary, and I think they could really take advantage of it. I do think Singletary he's a flex play. Of course, we talk about that Tennessee run defense. Not an easy matchup for any player, so that should be interesting. But as far as the weapons go, Collins as well as Noah Brown and then Dalton Schultz, all three like solid options this week. Collins obviously the best. I think he's a clear wide receiver too, especially with Stroud back in the lineup now.
And I agree. I think that as far as the Tennessee perspective goes here, you're playing Hopkins, you're playing Henry. I even think Tajay Spears this week, just based off what we've seen the last couple of weeks here, he probably gets a higher end consideration for me. I think the gadget plays really have worked. And they've really just used him not only in gadget plays, but just as a regular rusher now. Interesting of what we might see here as we head into the offseason, heading into 2024. 9 rushes, 40 yards, 5 catches for 27 yards. He had 6 targets as well. And so I think we're going to start to see the tides turn a little bit here in the offseason. I'm curious to see if they even bring back Derrick Henry or if this is farewell from Tennessee. And listen, I think that as far as it goes with Chigokonko, he had a game last week, caught a touchdown. He had 7 targets, 6 catches, 63 yards. I'm staying away from him. I think that is a bit of a mirage. I think that, you're not going to get the output that you want. Houston's been pretty good against tight end here, so I'm going to hold off on that one.
Yeah, I agree with you with Henry and Hopkins, and then I think Spears is an interesting one. The last time they played Houston a couple of weeks ago was in Tennessee. 9 carries for 30 yards, only had 1 reception for 7 yards. So that's kind of interesting. I do think he warrants flex consideration, but I also think you have to take that matchup into consideration. Going up against this Houston run defense, pretty tough run defense to go up against, and now they're at home, so kind of changes things as well down in Houston. It could be a tougher day for those running backs.
All right, so let's jump over to our next matchup as we head to the Meadowlands for the Giants as they take on the Los Angeles Rams. And Zach, I think that we really have to deal with Rams because it's been an up and down season here. Let's not sugarcoat it. It's been up and down on all fronts. And we've seen guys come, guys go. We've seen injuries. We've seen guys go off. It seems to be like the tides are staying here. Matthew Stafford, let's start with him. He's been pretty good. He's been a very high floor. Listen, the ceiling hasn't been that high, but that's what I think you want here. And obviously we head into a really good matchup against the Giants. Opportunity to put up some points, opportunity to sling the ball against that secondary that's been so unproven each and every week throughout the year. I think you got to play him this weekend.
Yeah, I agree with you. Start him. I think he's a low-end QB1. Really solid matchup against the Giants this week, and he's been rolling right now in this offense, especially with those weapons that he's got at his disposal, as well as a running back that he can go to in the passing game now. Everything is kind of going right for him, and he's got those weapons. So I feel like, yeah, it's a really solid option, Matthew Stafford is. So I definitely put him super flex, redraft, anywhere you want. Like, put him in your lineup. I think he's going to have a really good week.
As far as the rest of the team goes, this was going to be the week that Puka Nacua led my dynasty team to a championship. Unfortunately, he will not get that opportunity, but he will get the opportunity to go head-to-head against the New York Giants. I think this is a really good matchup for him. That's the guy that I think is going to end up finishing as the wide receiver 1 this week, and I'm calling it right now. I think that he's going to have a huge day. Obviously, last week we saw 9 catches, 164 yards, scored a touchdown, broke off a couple big ones, broke a couple tackles that led to big ones. And yeah, I think that Puka's he's a beast. And this is a fantastic matchup for him. obviously you got Kyron Williams, you got Cooper Kupp. You're rolling with those guys. Demarcus Robinson, I think, is a lower end flex play. Probably should be started in deeper leagues, I would say, as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then a guy to look out for in Demarcus Robinson. But those three guys, Kupp, Nakua, and Kyron Williams, they're locks in your lineup. You're starting every single one of them. They've been absolutely amazing the last couple of weeks. So keep riding with them in on championship Sunday and championship week in fantasy.
And then as far as the Giants go, it's a little interesting here because they made some headlines. They take out Tommy DeVito last weekend at halftime, and they put Tyrod Taylor in there. It was okay. Listen, he was a serviceable NFL quarterback, and they said, listen, that's what we want. So I'm going to say that Tyrod Taylor probably slides into that super flex range now, heading into this one. And I think the rushing ability is going to be what puts him apart, because I think they're going to send that defensive front at him pretty much the whole game, trying to stop Saquon Barkley. And so I think it's going to time to get out of the pocket a little bit, might get some fantasy points on the ground, and that's why I say he's probably a super flex start. Obviously, you're rolling Saquon Barkley if you got this far. You're putting him in. And as far as it goes with Darren Waller, it's sort of an interesting one because I'm probably staying away. He's probably a borderline tight end one, but probably on the wrong side of that.
I completely agree, Brett. I think he's a high end tight end too. I would probably put him there. So kind of depending on what's going on. Like, of course, there's kind of the thing of if you have both him and Cole Kmet, then yeah, you kind of monitor Kmet's situation and then maybe start Waller because you have to. It is a solid matchup, but the one thing I'm worried about there is the quarterback. So that kind of changes things a little bit with Tyrod there at the helm. But of course, Saquon, and that's kind of really it for me for that Giants talk. It's been like that for a couple of weeks now.
Yep, let's head to our next matchup here as we head to Philadelphia as the Eagles take on the Cardinals. Zach, Philly, it's quite simple. You probably have multiple guys in your lineup, or at least you probably have at least one guy who's on Philly if you make the finals, just because their whole offense has been so dominant the entire season. Start that guy, whether it's Hurts, whether it's Brown, Swift, Devonta, Dallas Goedert, like you're starting them. You're not shying away from any of them. I think that even Kenneth Gainwell, probably in a very deep league, you can maybe look as a very low end flex play. But yeah, you're starting your guys. This is going to be a game where I think a ton of points get put up on the Arizona Cardinals.
I was going to say, it's pretty simple. I couldn't say it better myself. Like, start your guys and enjoy it, because this Arizona defense is absolutely horrendous. So I think they're going to put up a lot of points here, especially at home in Philly.
And then as far as it goes on the other side in Arizona, I think that it's sort of going to be, you're going to play Kyler. Granted, he has a questionable tag. He is sick right now. So he missed practice with an illness. And so we'll monitor what's going on. But listen, I think that he actually warrants a starting spot this weekend, just because I think the upside's still there. And we've seen it since he's returned. Like, he's scoring 20 points pretty consistently. I think that's what you want. Obviously, if you have him in Superflex, you're playing him. But as far as it goes in one quarterbacks, it's really not that bad of a matchup. Philadelphia has been not as good as they were last year. If you have Trey McBride, he's a tight end one, obviously. Has been pretty much this entire stretch down the season. James Conner, you're probably playing him as well. Probably a top 20 back. And then Marquise Hollywood Brown's kind of interesting because I think it's probably a flex option. And he is still hurt. He had a heel injury for the last couple of weeks. And so keep my eyes on him. But as far as it goes on the upside, I'd probably say flex and flex only.
Yeah, kind of interesting. Somebody to monitor in Hollywood Brown if he's going to play this week and they're going to go with him. I would say Connor clearly has the toughest matchup of any of these guys. The Philly run defense is a brutal matchup. So I would clearly temper expectations and maybe even look for a better option if you could find one. I wouldn't force an option, but I do know that these expectations definitely are you got to simmer down on them this week in this matchup. But clearly, the weakness in this Philly defense has been their secondary. So Kyler could have a really solid day here, as well as Trey McBride. Two guys like if they're on point, like they can put up some fantasy numbers definitely in the championship.
All right, let's head to our next matchup. It is the New Orleans Saints traveling down south to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Zach, I think that we have to start here with Rachaad White because I think it's the safest play of anybody in this entire game this week. Rachaad White has been pretty dominant each and every week here the entire season, which is pretty awesome. I think outside of 3 weeks, he scored in double-digit fantasy points. And so you're rolling him out there. There is a chance that he is on your team here. He's been very reliable if you've had him, and so you're rolling him out there this weekend. Godwin, Evans, even Baker Mayfield, I think, are all starts this week.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better, Brad. Rachaad White's been a really big surprise and in a good way, like really good stuff from him so far this season, and we kind of expected it a little bit at the start of the season because he was just the only guy there after they let Fournette go. So, but good to see that he kind of really stepped into that role and has taken it on and is clearly that number one guy. I think Godwin has been a good surprise the last couple of weeks. A lot of targets, a lot of receptions. So that's a good sign heading into a solid matchup against New Orleans this weekend. And of course, you're starting Mike Evans as well.
And I would say, just as far as dynasty perspective, as that goes, Trey Palmer, definitely a guy to go out and add. Wouldn't obviously start him this weekend, but certainly after, I believe he had 4 catches on 6 targets last week, and so it is a good guy to go out and grab. As far as it goes with New Orleans, Olave practice limited, and so definitely keep an eye on that one. But you're playing your regular guys here, I believe. You're playing Kamara. Derek Carr, I think, probably warrants like a super flex play, but not a quarterback one play.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. I'm a little higher on Carr this week because of the matchup. I understand. Yeah, it's not fantastic, but this secondary in Tampa Bay is very weak. And kind of a streaming option in Carr because of how good the matchup is. I think they're going to have to throw the ball around because Tampa's been putting up a ton, and I mean a ton of points on offense. So that's been huge for this Tampa offense. They've been putting up points, so a lot of teams can't really keep up with them. I think New Orleans is going to have to throw the ball, and Olave, of course, keep an eye on the injury report there. And then Kamara. Those 3 I'm kind of confident in putting in my lineup this week.
All right, let's head to our next matchup. San Francisco, as they take on the Commanders. Zach, we sort of led off with this towards the top of the show. San Francisco, pretty simple. You're starting your guys. I would monitor Debo's status because it seems that he's questionable and he was limited in practice. But other than that, I think that you're going with Ayuk, you're going with Kittle, you're going with Debo, you're going with Brock Purdy, and you're going with Christian McCaffrey.
I'm expecting the ultimate bounce back week from Brock Purdy this week. They're going up against Washington, and it's not going to be pretty for the Commanders this week. That's all I'll say. I think Purdy, I should say it won't be pretty for the Washington defense because I think this San Fran offense is going to go to town. They a huge loss last week and kind of some doubters there in the NFL doubting this San Fran team. So they got a statement to make, and I think they'll do it this week in Washington. So definitely start all your guys there. It should be a good week for all of them.
Yeah, and then as far as Washington goes, it's a little more interesting because obviously we've seen what teams have been able to do against San Francisco, and it's not much. And so you sort of have to temper everyone that you might have on Washington. And obviously, we talked at the top of the show that Sam Howell got benched. So Jacoby Brissett's in there. I'm not sure how much I have confidence in at Terry McLaurin even. Like, I think he's a flex out wide 3 even. But I'm tempering my expectations. Like, if I have him, I'm playing him. But I don't know that he's gonna, score a 40-point week. Curtis Samuel is probably also a flex consideration. You're probably rolling Brian Robinson out there right now. He has a questionable tag, but I'm not confident at all in this one because I think that we've seen running backs just get 0 yards against San Francisco, even negative yards, some of them. And so, yeah, I'm tempering the expectation. And the fact that San Francisco is probably going to be up in this game, like Washington's going to have to throw the ball, I think it leads even more so to have less confidence in B-Rob.
Yeah, I agree with you. And obviously, Robinson, the questionable tag right now, even if he doesn't play, I'm not too confident in Antonio Gibson. I think you said it. It's hard to go up against this San Fran defense. He's a flex option for me, but I wouldn't have too much confidence in it. I do have more confidence in McLaurin than you, Brett, because of what I've seen the last couple of weeks when Brissett has come into the game. Right when he's coming to the game, his first target is to Terry McLaurin every single time. So I think they're kind of, when you see that kind of a lot, we obviously saw it with Joe Flacco. Like, the first option is your top wide. So I think that's a big thing with the backup quarterback coming in. I think McLaurin, I'm not expecting a monster week, but I'm expecting solid enough numbers. I would say he's a flex play for me, but a little bit of a higher end flex play, I think. I do have confidence with Brissett coming in despite the matchup.
Yeah, I agree. Let's 4 o'clock window here. Pittsburgh at Seattle. Zach, let's first start out with Pittsburgh because it was Mason Rudolph, and Rudolph saved Christmas. It was pretty magical last weekend. And so now we head into a matchup against Seattle, and it's been a bit of a tougher go here playing against the Seattle defense. Are we tempering expectations here on the entirety of the Pittsburgh offense?
I would say, yeah, most of the Pittsburgh offense, yeah, you would definitely temper expectations, especially with Rudolph at quarterback. I think it's kind of, you go either way on the running backs. It's pretty similar this week. It's kind of just an average matchup, right square in the middle. Of course, Najee has a questionable tag now with a knee problem, so that's something to keep an eye on as the weeks go on. He missed practice yesterday, didn't get a report on today, so kind of something to keep an eye on. But as for the wide receivers, Brett, I'm more confident in Pickens now than I am in Deontay Johnson, but I'm not entirely really confident. They're flex plays for me, both of them. And it was kind of surprising to me because Pat Freiermuth last week, I thought it was going to be a awesome game from him. And they did not target him once. So he's completely off the radar for me. I thought it was going to be a better matchup for him against Cincinnati, but they did not target him once. Crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think that I'm going to stay away from everybody on Pittsburgh except for the running backs this week. I'm very lukewarm on even Deontay this week. I think he's a flex option, but I also think that with the quarterback situation, it's not that great. And I think the Seattle's done a good job of locking down their number one receivers pretty much the entire season, even without Jamal Adams playing in there. They've done a really good job. And so to me, I'm tempering my expectations. I'm rolling with Najee probably as a flex option. Jalen Warren's probably a low-end running back 2, high-end flex option. Falls a bit higher just because I think the passing game has been there for him where it hasn't been for Najee. As far as Seattle goes, it's pretty simple. Like, if you have DK, you're starting him. If you have Kenneth Walker, beware, because he missed practice today. So, I'm not sure if it was on purpose. He was dealing with a shoulder injury. Then there was reports that he actually was sick, and that was why he was missing practice. Beware and just follow the reports. I'm not as confident in starting Zach Charbonnet this week if that is the case and he ends up being the starter, because I don't know that he's been as effective this season as they would have liked it to be. As far as it goes, though, with the receivers, like you're starting both of them. Gino's, I would say, a super flex option, but probably not a one quarterback option.
Yeah, I agree with you. I on all fronts there because if Walker can't go, then I'm not confident in Charbonnet, especially because of the matchup. Pittsburgh's run defense is really tough to go up against, and as far as the receivers go, it's an interesting one. I'm confident in really all three of them. I would say, of course, Smith and Jigba is the lowest of the group, but still a flex option for me because of that Pittsburgh secondary. I think they could take advantage in some kind of ways against them.
All right, so let's jump to our next matchup here. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to host the Cincinnati Bengals Sunday 4:25 start. Zach, let's start out with the Chiefs. And we talk about what Pittsburgh did last week at offense. They were doing it to Cincinnati. I think this is a huge opportunity right now for Rashee Rice to cement himself as the number one receiver heading into next season even. And, I think that he's proven it that he can do it for this season. I think that this is another big spot here for him. I'm set and forget with Rashee Rice as well as Isaiah Pacheco. Travis Kelce tempering my expectations a little bit here because we've seen the lowest of low the last couple weeks on him. Obviously, you're playing him if you have him, but this could be the downslide here that we've been talking about the last couple weeks of him being the number one receiver or being the number one tight end in all of fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's one of those that you could temper expectations, but he's still Travis Kelce. I think he'll kind of at some point get that get right game, and you're okay. Well, that's Travis Kelce kind of deal. So it could be this week, may not. I think since he's gonna kind of focus in on him like other defenses have, and then it kind of opens up things for a guy like Rashee Rice. As far as the running backs go, Pacheco did not practice today, so that's something to keep an eye on. It has had shoulder and then illness and all kinds of problems. So had that head injury last week. So like everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong for Pacheco owners. I would say heading into this week, like the only guy would be Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and at best he's a flex option. I don't have a ton of confidence if Pacheco's out. But that's really it for Kansas City. Of course, Mahomes, even though it's been rough, you're still going to be starting Mahomes if you made it this far.
Yeah, and it is rough because, listen, I have him this week. I also have Brock Purdy, and I can't shy away from starting Patrick Mahomes. I just can't. Even in this sort of matchup for Brock Purdy going up against Washington, like I can't shy away from starting Pat Mahomes because there's always the potential for a 40-point game with a Pat Mahomes. And this year just hasn't been his year. But you can't shy away from it because the ability is there. He still is one of the top three quarterbacks, and you can dispute, and debate which one of the three is number one and which one is number two. But he is at that upper echelon of elite quarterbacks. You're rolling him out there if you have.
Yeah, definitely agree.
And then as far as it goes on the Cincinnati side, it's a little interesting as well. Obviously, we talked Jake Browning and what that offense looks like compared to what it was when obviously Burrow was in there. I would say as far as Browning goes, it's probably Kansas City's been really good this year at defense. And so I would temper my expectations. Browning's probably a super flex start, though, still, I think, based on the fact that he's been able to sling the ball. And so that said, I'm probably rolling him out there Jamar Chase, he was limited as he returned to practice today. And so should be noted whether or not he can practice tomorrow before heading into the weekend. Obviously, if he's playing, we're playing him. Mixon and T. Higgins, I think, are set it and forget it. And then I'm probably staying away from a Tyler Boyd, especially knowing Jamar is sort of knocking on the door.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Brett. And should be a interesting one for Cincinnati. Of course, I would say it's Joe Mixon. I think they would be riding with him. It was just a rough week for them overall because of that Pittsburgh front. I think Kansas City kind of gives them a tougher matchup because of that pass rush. Although it didn't look great because they were down in the game, I think their pass rush is still really solid and can give a couple of quarterbacks some problems. Kind of keeping an eye on those injuries. And I would say for T. Higgins, if Jamar is out, he's a wide receiver 2 for me. I think even though it could be a little bit tougher, I think they'll be going to him because I'm expecting a Kansas City like bounce back, and I think Cincinnati will end up being down in the game. So kind of looking at that, I think T. Higgins will get a fair amount of targets, especially if because Jamar is probably not in there. Like that's going to be the big thing for me.
Yeah, so before we even hit offseason, I'm going to predict here because I think that watching what we watched of T. Higgins the last couple of weeks, I believe that the Cincinnati Bengals are franchise tag him. I think that he's not going anywhere. I think that they're going to keep him on Cincinnati, and he's not going to hit free agency. I think that they've really figured out, hey, this guy could be a number 1 receiver, so let's have 2 of them. Let's have Jamar Chase line up, and let's have T. Higgins line up, and we'll continue to have 2 number 1 receivers. I just think that letting him go out into the open market is going to be a little bit of a risky business because he's going to get paid. And so this is going to be one of those where I think he ends up staying, and whether they end up trading him and getting something for him, that's a conversation for later on. Kick the can down the road a little bit, whether it comes in the middle of the season or not, obviously depends on start next year. But yeah, I think that he's going to get franchise tagged, and they will control the narrative as far as whether they keep him or not.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett.
All right, so let's jump into our next matchup here. It is the Denver Broncos hosting the Los Angeles Chargers. Zach, first let's start out with the Chargers. Keenan Allen, obviously, he hurt. He didn't practice again today with the heel. Sort of was a prediction last week, I believe, that we spoke about it, where it seemed like you're probably going to try to just shut him down maybe because there's really no risk in letting him sit down and watch from the sidelines. So that said, do you think that there's any sort of receiver appeal here heading into championship week as far as the Chargers go?
Like there's not much. Of course, people will see, oh, well, it's a good matchup for Austin Eckler because he's going up against the Denver defense. And yeah, it's a better matchup than most in the running game. I'm still not confident in Austin Eckler. Like what has been shown in the last couple of weeks to make me feel confident in Austin Eckler? Absolutely nothing, Brett. So from that standpoint, like I'm really not too confident here. There's been like a couple of good games for Josh Palmer. It could be an option. Like there's not much for me. And although Eckler had 15 for 65, then got the receptions last week, he still only had 8.6 fantasy points, which does not make me feel confident in him. Really just not confident at all, Brett. In most guys here, of course, if Eckler, you're still starting him if you have him. I would be very proud of you if you made it all the way to the championship game with Austin Eckler as your first round pick. So I mean, if you made it there, then you're starting him. But other than that, there's just flex options all around. I don't know if I'm really confident in any of them, Brett.
I agree. I think that Easton Stick is probably a lower end super flex option this week because he hasn't been bad, and that's the only reason. It's a favorable matchup and he hasn't been bad. Josh Palmer is a very deep league flex option, and yeah, it's really dependent on if Keenan Allen plays or not. I'm staying away from Quentin Johnston as I have for most of this season. And yeah, it's just it's interesting on Austin Eckler because you're not going to bench Austin Eckler, but you're also not confident right now based off of what we've seen in the last little bit here.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Brett. And as I'll take us to Denver, as we kind of talked about it earlier. Of course, Jarrett Stidham now starting at quarterback 4 in place of Russell Wilson. And I'm not really confident in I don't think anybody. I think some people would say, oh, well, Javonte Williams. I'm still not confident in Javonte Williams. A dynasty owner I am of Javonte, and I have not liked what I've seen. So I'm really not that confident here. I would say Javante's a flex play. That's probably it. Cortland Sutton hasn't been practicing, so probably won't have their top weapon, Jarrett Stidham. And if that's the case, then not one of those wide receivers or tight ends going in my lineup. I would stay away from all of them.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Sutton, even if Sutton plays, like he's a deeper league flex option based off the fact that I don't know that he's going to be at 100%. Same thing with Javonte, league flex option. Jerry Jeudy, I'm just leaving on my bench.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so heading to our next match, it is Green Bay Packers traveling to Minnesota for Sunday Night Football. Zach, like we talked about at the top of the show, this could be right here for that 6th seed in the playoffs. I believe the winner of this would leapfrog into the 6th seed, clinching a spot if Seattle can lose a game. And so it's a big game, plain and simple. It's a big game. And as far as it goes with the running back room, say you're probably rolling Aaron Jones out there, but it hasn't been pretty for the last little while here. And so you're probably playing, but you're probably tempering your expectations here against what's been a pretty good Minnesota defense. I think Jaden Reed's proven himself. You're probably putting him in there in a flex option just from the last bulk of the weeks. But other than that, I don't know that you can feel confident in starting Bob Kraft, Dontavian Wicks even.
Yeah, I'm really not. I think, of course, Jaden Reed, I would say is probably the go-to if he's playing because of just what he's been able to put up. But even so, like he's got that questionable tag. Will that kind of hold him back? I would say if he's practicing, so put him as a flex play right now. That's where I'd put him, and then other than that, Aaron Jones, I would say, yeah, he's a solid option this week because of even though it's a tough front that he's going up against in Minnesota, but I feel like Aaron Jones kind of solidified himself as the lead guy, so he'll get a good workload in this offense. But I'm really not confident in a lot of these guys because of how tough it's been to get past this Minnesota defense. They've just been really, really solid the last couple of weeks, and kind of hard to predict what's going to happen in this game.
Yeah, and then as far as Minnesota goes, I think that obviously you're rolling out Justin Jefferson. I'm not that confident in Jaron Hall. I know that there were a lot of super flex people that were taking Jaron Hall, seeing the ability. I don't know. I just don't have these high expectations for Jaron Hall. He really didn't do that well when he played against Green Bay last time. He didn't do that well, played at Atlanta the following week. And so I'm not starting him even in a super flex capacity. The guy I am starting, though, is Todd Chandler. I think that Todd Chandler has proven that he can be an effective runner. He's proven that he's going to get a workload as well. And so Packers have been not that great against running backs. And so I'm rolling him out there at least as a running back 2 option, to a high-end flex option. And then I would say Jordan Addison, depending on if he plays, he practiced limited today. He's a flex option if he can go.
Yeah, I completely agree. Ty Chandler, like, although Green Bay was really tough against Chuba Hubbard last week, it's still a really good option and a really good matchup for Ty Chandler. I put him in the same spot, an RB2. And I think it's a perfect spot for him in a matchup where, yeah, they'll have a backup quarterback in there. So they'll probably be relying on that run game and trying to take advantage of Green Bay's weaknesses on defense.
All right, so no Monday Night Football this week with the New Year's obviously coming up. And so that's it for our slate here. Let's head into our lock of the week, though. Zach, these are guys that we basically are putting outside the top 25 in consensus rankings. And for you, at least, you've been pretty good at this one for the bulk of the season. You're up 10-6, and obviously last week you took Tyler Lockett, who ended up going off for a sweet 16.1 points to my Ty Chandler, who had 7.7. So you're on the clock now. Who is your lock of the week?
Interesting. I'm kind of looking here at taking advantage of weak secondaries and secondaries that kind of gone after. Secondary I've not gone after just yet is the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I'm going with a guy that I've gone with a couple times here. It's Adam Thielen. I think Adam Thielen's going to have a really solid week here, although those big games from DJ Chark and Jonathan Mingo have kind of come around here. I do think Adam Thielen will be a really solid flex option this week. I think he'll put up those fantasy numbers. The biggest thing for me, he kind of had a bit of a dip the last couple of weeks before last week, but throughout all those weeks, just the targets were still there. So I'm confident he'll continue to get those targets and be able to put up solid numbers against this Jacksonville secondary.
And for me, it's pretty simple. And I'm going to go to the well again here with a guy that we've spoken very highly about pretty much the entire season. And the reason is safe floor. It's David Montgomery. I think that we've seen each and every week Montgomery get double-digit carries. And I think that the workload here at least proves that he is going to be a solid option here. Obviously, I understand last week Jahmyr Gibbs had a pretty ridiculous output. And so it's scaring a lot of people on the Montgomery expectations here. I think that, yes, he did score a touchdown. It sort of saved his day. That said, I think that against a tough defense like Dallas this week, I think Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm going to temper a little bit of expectations this week on him. I think they're going to stop him a bit. That's going to obviously lead to them having to put Monty in the between the tackles where they haven't been as good, Dallas. And so I think Monty's a pretty good one.
Yeah, definitely interesting, Brett.
All right, so let's head into our ones to watch. These are guys who were owned in less than 50% of leagues that we think you should go out and grab on waivers. Obviously, we normally do for next week. Most of our leagues are ending this week. There are still some leagues, though, that have a 2-week playoff and fill into next week. So we're going to continue the same formula here for at least this week before next week we sort of turn a dynasty perspective into ones to watch. Zach, I think that I've pretty much owned you the entire season here in the ones to watch. Josh Downs, 9.9 PPR points to your Wan'Dale Robinson, 4.6 PPR points. So I'm going for the guy that you absolutely loved coming out of our startup draft. I actually drafted him, traded him to you for James Cook. Sorry to knock on you. It was a pretty good trade for me, though. Seems to be a guy, though, that's coming around here on the dynasty perspective. Zamir White, I think that the workload the last couple of weeks, obviously Josh Jacobs not in the lineup. The last couple of weeks, it's been 17 carries for 69 yards in the score against the Chargers in Week 15. Then last week, obviously, 22 carries, 145 yards, didn't score a touchdown, didn't matter. Still put out double-digit fantasy points. This is going to be point blank, I think, death taxes and Josh Jacobs not returning to Las Vegas next year as they head into the rebuild. We'll see if Devontae actually sticks around or he gets traded to Aaron Rodgers' New York Jets. I think he'll end up getting around. They'll build their team around Devontae, but that's a conversation for another day. Zamir White, I think here down the stretch is going to just be, turn himself into the running back one heading into next season. And so, yeah, he's my pick. I think we saw it last year with, Rondale White. I think that as far as it goes with, Tampa Bay and, Rashad White, Rondale White was on the Tennessee Titans. Rashad White, as I think my early 2000s memories here coming in. Rashad White, we sort of saw it last year with Touchdown Lenny and the perspective there. I think that he at least has the upside to do that, what Rashad White did last year heading into this year. So he's my pick.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brett. It should be a good next couple of weeks, definitely, to end this season for Zamir White. I'm looking, for me, I'm going with Demarcus Robinson, and a guy who's, he's been really solid the last couple of weeks, Brett, specifically the last 4 weeks. So what stands out to me is the yards as well as the fantasy points, as well as the touchdowns. The yards that he's put up the last 4 weeks: 55 yards, 46 yards, 44 yards, and 82 yards. And every single one of those games, he's had a touchdown. So really, really solid option. And he's been no lower than wide receiver 26 in all 4 of those games, Brett. So that's unbelievable stuff. That's flex option territory. So gets another solid matchup this week against the Giants. But then the week after, I think they're going to be going to him a lot again. They're going up against San Fran. So San Fran will be focusing on those top weapons in Nakua and Kupp. And I think Robinson could have another really solid day. But the big thing right now, 4 straight games with a touchdown. Definitely a guy to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and we've definitely seen that in the last little while here with McVay and how he likes going to the hot hand and riding the hot hand, and he has his guys. And so this could be one of those guys that heads into next season as his wide receiver 3.
Yeah, definitely, Brett.
All right, so let's get to some viewer questions here. First, let's start out with George, who says, is Njoku a good start without Amari Cooper active? I'm just going to say a quick yes to that one.
Yes, a great start. Put him in your lineup.
All right. And now we jump over to Anthony. Gus or Ford, half PPR. I'm stressing, boys. Zach, take it away.
So this is an interesting one because, I kind of talked about Gus Edwards a little bit before. It's kind of touchdown or bust for me. I think that's something I worry a little bit about. When it comes to Ford, I think he gives me a little more upside than Gus Edwards. So that's kind of what I'm kind of looking for. And I feel like the floor is a little bit higher for Jerome Ford. I think you kind of know what he's going to get. Whereas we have Edwards there and Justice Hill could take a lot of those touches away. I would be more confident in Ford, even though it's a tough matchup against the Jets tonight, Brett.
Yeah, but is it really? The Jets, of all teams, have been struggling against running backs. And so while they have an amazing secondary, they've been really bad tight ends, which is why Njoku ends up being like a really, really good start now. Just a really juicy matchup here. And I think running backs actually help. So I'm taking Ford. I agree with you. I think Gus Bus is a little touchdown dependent for me. So, yeah, I think it probably borders on he probably even gets a little bit of a boost without Cooper there, probably into the low 20s, into the high 30s.
Yeah, definitely, Brett.
All right. Thank you for your questions. Next week, Zach, we are heading into our recap of the season of what has just been a pretty ridiculous season that's been filled with, I think, more injuries than we've seen in basically any other NFL season here in the last little while. Any last thoughts here before we head to championship weekend?
I was going to say, just good luck in the championships to all of you viewers. Like, it's going to be a good one here. in a season where, like you said, Brett, it's been a ton of injuries, you made it to the championship. So good job on that part, and bring home a win.
Yeah, congrats to everyone out there who made their championship game. And if you fell just short and you're playing in your third place game, good luck to you on that one as well. We'll be here next week to break it all down in our fantasy season recap. Wherever you get your podcast, and give us a thumbs up. And in the words of Aaron Rodgers, the night is darkest before the dawn. We shall rise yet again. Zach Matt, I'm Brett Allen, signing off the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Catch you next week with our recap.